The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
They need to stop inciting our city's residents.
Escalating tensions. The governor of Illinois and the Trump administration at odds on who is at fault. What the courts say about keeping peace in the streets as protesters clash with federal agents.
But I think we're doing very well, and I think Hamas has been agreeing to things that are very important.
Peace talks resume in the Middle East. Just how close are negotiators to ending the two-year war?
Why aren't you negotiating? There's nothing for us to negotiate. The House has done its job.
Shutdown stalemate continues, where each side stands as the funding lapse hits 1 week. Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. A series of setbacks for the Trump administration's plan to mobilize federal troops to locations across the U.S. We start in Illinois, where a lawsuit filed today aims to block patrol agents with their vehicles. Authorities arrested Marimar Martinez and Anthony Ian Santos Ruiz, the suspected drivers. Now, according to DHS, Martinez has a history of doxing federal agents, and she was shot by a defensive fire from the Border Patrol agents, but has been released from the hospital and into FBI custody. Several agents were also sent to the hospital with various injuries. Secretary Kristi Noem has deployed special operations teams to Chicago after she says Governor Pritzker refused to allow local police to help secure the scene. And over in Portland, a large crowd of protesters clashing with agents outside of an ICE facility on the south side of the city, prompting multiple arrests and the deployment of gas to disperse the crowd. In other news now, the government shutdown is now in day 6, and congressional leaders are still playing the blame game.
Well, let me look right into the camera and tell you very clearly, Republicans are the ones concerned about health care. Republicans are the party working around the clock every day to fix health care.
Healthcare is the sticking point, keeping the government shut down, particularly renewing subsidies to cover health insurance costs for millions of households. Republicans argue the time to debate that issue is December, and Congress should pass a stopgap bill now to fund the government for now. And Democrats argue notices are already going out to Americans showing premiums, copays, and deductibles will dramatically increase.
Well, unfortunately, Republicans are lying because they're losing in the court of public opinion as it relates to what's going on right now. We are standing up for the health care of hardworking American taxpayers.
And the enrollment period for health insurance coverage opens November 1st. Americans are divided on who's to blame for the shutdown. According to a CBS News YouGov poll, nearly 40% of Americans blame President Trump, and Republicans in Congress 30% blame congressional Democrats, and 31% blame both sides equally for the stalemate. A Nebraska police officer is alive, alert, and responding after being shot in the head today. The violent altercation coming after the officer attempted to have a conversation with a man who was acting erratically, threatening customers and workers at a gas station in Omaha. During their conversation, the suspect pulled a gun and shot at two officers. The suspect has been taken into custody, and the injured policeman is expected to recover. Well, classes were canceled today at South Carolina State University after two separate shootings on campus over their homecoming weekend. Police say the first shooting happened at the Eugene Suites dormitory, where a 19-year-old woman identified as Jalea Butler was killed. Now, a second shooting left an unidentified male hospitalized in critical condition. A third person was also injured. 18-year-old Matthew McCoy has been arrested in connection to both shootings. University President Alexander Conyers confirmed that the suspect is not a student.
We expect the maximum punishment for anyone that comes onto this campus with the intent to harm one of our students.
Counseling is being made available to all students. A town hall was held this afternoon for students to voice their concerns over safety on campus. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court began their 2025-26 term today with a rejection of an appeal from Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend and accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. She was convicted in 2021 on charges related to facilitating the crimes of the late sex offender Epstein and is serving a 20-year prison sentence. Now on the docket are cases that carry major stakes for the future of birthright citizenship, tariffs, and the scope of presidential power. The National News Desk, Atra El-Nashar, has a look at what's ahead.
The first Monday in October always means the beginning of a new term for the Supreme Court. Seldom has a president's agenda been this dependent on the outcomes of cases on the High Court's docket. Rulings from the 9 justices will determine how far President Trump can go with his plans for the economy, immigration, and firing federal officials.
We have a very, very big case in the Supreme Court.
On tariffs, the Supreme Court agreeing to fast-track hearings for a pair of cases brought by small businesses and Democratic-led states challenging the president's broad and unilateral rollout of tariffs on imports coming from just about every country on earth.
I think the future of business overnight was threatened by the tariffs, and so I felt like I had no choice.
The central question here, does the International Emergency Economic Powers Act authorize the president to impose tariffs? Lower courts have said no.
Our country has a chance to be unbelievably rich again, but it can also be unbelievably poor again.
On the president's signature issue, immigration, he seeks to end birthright citizenship to babies born in the U.S. whose parents are here illegally or temporarily.
Birthright citizenship is about slavery. That's not about tourists coming in and touching a piece of sand and all of a sudden they're a citizen.
It's a really unfortunate attack on, I think, one of the foundational American principles.
So far, 5 federal courts have rejected the president's executive order as a violation of the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court is expected to have the final word, though it's not officially on the docket as of Monday. On the president's efforts to purge government officials who don't align with his agenda, the justices will decide the validity of Trump's attempted firings of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook and Federal Trade Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter. Now, the High Court's other cases this term could decide whether laws limiting participation of transgender athletes are constitutional. Though, like you mentioned, one case the Supreme Court declined to hear came from Jeffrey Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. She had hoped the court would overturn her criminal conviction. But I want to note, President Trump just a few minutes ago said that that is something he would look at, though he said he doesn't know much about it.
And there's also a batch of cases that could have implications for the 2026 midterm elections. Atra, can you walk us through those?
Right. So first, the court will hear a case out of Illinois, and this one's all about mail-in ballots and who, specifically, if a candidate has the right to challenge whether they can be counted if they're postmarked by Election Day but received after. There's also a case centered on campaign finance law that could have implications for elections to come, brought by the fundraising arms of the Republican senators and House members. And this is about whether limits on coordinating campaign spending violate the First Amendment. And then finally, there's a case out of Louisiana that challenges the state's drawing of a second majority-minority congressional district.
In Washington, D.C., Atra El-Nashar, thank you. A man who was arrested outside a Washington, D.C. church yesterday is facing several charges, including possession of a Molotov cocktail. Police say 41-year-old Louis Jerry from New Jersey was previously barred from St. Matthew's Cathedral but refused to leave. The cathedral was hosting an annual service to mark the beginning of the Supreme Court term. And this, of course, comes as security concerns in the Jewish community are growing after that deadly attack outside a UK synagogue on Yom Kippur. And just days before October 7th. The National News Desk Claire Weber spoke with Jewish community members to see what's being done to prioritize safety.
I'm always aware wherever I am, thinking about, my security.
A reported rise in anti-Semitism globally has left local Jewish community members feeling at risk.
I usually wear a Jewish star and I changed to a different symbol. That feels a little bit too unsafe to wear a Jewish star around my neck.
A recent deadly car ramming and stabbing attack outside of a synagogue in Manchester has only heightened those fears. 2 Jewish people were killed, several others injured.
And there's a sense of fear amongst our board, amongst our congregation. But all that being said, we are a strong people.
David Schumann says his Mercer Island synagogue has increased armed security presence, began screening congregation members, and started using an incident report system.
I've never been so anxious in my life, getting ready to go to shul, to temple, to pray. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
Michelle Bott-Orr says her temple has done the same, even preparing members for worst-case scenarios.
We have had evacuation drills in the synagogue during services. We have maps and we practice, when it's a crowded synagogue, where to go, if we need to.
But the added security measures, while necessary for people's safety, come at a high cost.
Jewish people have been coming together and funding all of these needs, but it's not sustainable.
As need grows, Schumann says so does the toll on local congregations.
Police in the UK are investigating a suspected arson attack at a mosque in England over the weekend as a hate crime. You can see here surveillance video of that fire starting. Detectives are now searching for 2 suspects. It happened Saturday night, just 2 days after the Manchester synagogue attack. No one was injured. Coming up, President Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza is now being discussed, the remaining obstacles that stand in the way of lasting peace. Plus, the changes the CDC announced today related to the COVID-19 shot and the MMR vaccine. Also, how long the person who plotted to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh will spend in prison and why some people are outraged at that sentence. On the eve of 2 years since the October 7th massacre, indirect negotiations have begun on President Donald Trump's 21-point peace plan to end the war in Gaza. Both Israeli and Hamas delegations are in Cairo, meeting with mediators from the United States, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey in an effort to finalize a lasting ceasefire. The White House today saying they want to move quickly and have the hostages released as soon as possible.
Of course, it's very important, as I just mentioned, that we get this done quickly. That's how the president's team feels, so we can get some momentum, get the hostages out, and then move to the next part of this, which is really ensuring that we can create a lasting and durable peace in Gaza and ensure that Gaza is a place that no longer threatens the security of Israel or the United States.
But many concerns remain. Reuters says Hamas sources tell them they will not agree to disarm and disband until Israel ends its occupation and establishes a Palestinian state. Israel says they won't stop until the hostages are released. Negotiators from Hamas are seeking clarity on the mechanism to achieve a swap of remaining hostages, both alive and dead, for Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. A new tropical storm may form in the Atlantic this week. Forecasters are watching a burst of stormy weather in the central tropical Atlantic that could form into a depression or a storm in the next few days. It would be named Jerry. Experts predict it'll track near or north of the northeast Caribbean islands by later this week. And Jerry's future beyond that remains unclear. Meanwhile, a deadly tornado that tore across a North Dakota town in June has been upgraded to an EF5. Now, this is the first EF5 on American soil in 12 years. That's the strongest tornado on the scale, with winds exceeding 210 miles per hour. The storm killed 3 people and caused severe damage in Enderlin. It derailed a train, debarked trees, and tossed debris hundreds of feet. The CDC now recommends people talk to a healthcare provider before getting a COVID vaccine. This new guideline is reflected in the CDC's vaccination schedules, which the agency updated today. Now, the change is based on a recommendation from the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. CDC Acting Director Jim O'Neill accepted the recommendation last week. O'Neill also just asked vaccine manufacturers to make separate shots for measles, mumps, and rubella to replace the combination MMR vaccine, something President Trump suggested last month. After 63 years in business, all Rite Aid stores are now closed. In May, the pharmacy announced it filed for bankruptcy for the second time in less than 2 years. As part of a restructuring, the company sold off assets to CVS Pharmacy, Walgreens, and other competitors. Rite Aid customers can still request prescriptions and immunization records on Rite Aid's website. Well, President Donald Trump is joining the call for Democratic candidate Jay Jones to withdraw from the race for Virginia Attorney General. Over the weekend, the National Review posted text messages from 2022 between Jones and another state lawmaker where Jones repeatedly called for violence against the then GOP Speaker of the House, Todd Gilbert. This is Speaker of Virginia House. Jones in a series of messages comparing the speaker to the worst people in history, suggesting he deserves death more than they do. After being asked to stop, Jones continued with threats against the politician's wife and children. He then finished the text thread writing, quote, "I mean, do I think Todd and Jennifer are evil and that they're breeding little fascists? Yes." End quote. Democratic candidate for governor, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, has condemned the text but did not call for Jones to withdraw from the race. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin told Fox News today her response does not go far enough.
And now Jay Jones comes out and says that he has 2 bullets for Todd Gilbert's head and wants to see his children die. I mean, this is unbelievable. And what's shocking also is that after calling for the normal apology, the Democrat candidates, Abigail Spanberger and the rest of them, were out campaigning this weekend like it was nothing.
Jay Jones has issued an apology. He says he can't take back his words, but feels ashamed about them. Jones has not responded to the calls to withdraw. A Washington Post poll shows Jones holding a 6-point lead over current Attorney General Jason Miyares as of last Friday. The 2025 Nobel Prize in Medicine goes to 3 scientists, 2 in the United States and 1 in Japan. Mary Brunkow, Fred Ramsdell, and Dr. Simon Saguchi discovered a mechanism the body uses to protect against autoimmune diseases called peripheral immune tolerance. And more Nobel Prizes will be announced this week, including the Nobel Peace Prize on Friday. We have reporters all across the country and your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Utah, where Salt Lake City residents are dealing with the aftermath of record rainfall.
It's a rough ride home for residents of this Salt Lake City neighborhood. Floodwaters are blocking driveways, soaking basements, and there's no easy way around. Gary Edwards had just gotten off of work when he found his street submerged.
And then I come home and see this. So it's all new to me. And I could not believe it was this deep.
The flooding comes after hours of heavy rain, overwhelming a major flood canal known as the city drain.
And I didn't think it could get worse.
That's Andrea Castillo. She says school bullies did this to her daughter's hair on a bus ride to school.
You can see the majority of it was here in the front. It went all the way back here.
This all happened on Friday, and since then, a stylist helped fix her hair, but Andrea says bullying has been an issue for years. Andrea says her daughter was ridiculed over her school gear and physical appearance, and that every time it happened, she reported it, but nothing happened.
Oh, we'll talk to them, and clearly the talking is doing nothing.
Compass Rose Public Schools sent us a statement today saying, quote, the campus leadership team, district team members, and our external transportation vendor are actively investigating the incident you referenced to understand exactly what occurred.
Coming up, the growing outrage over the prison sentence for the person who plotted to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh right after this. Questions linger in South Carolina after the beachfront home of a circuit court judge, Diane Goodstein, and former state senator Arnold Goodstein burned to the ground in Edisto Beach this weekend. 3 people were injured. The judge was not one of them. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division is investigating after some lawmakers say the judge was targeted for prior rulings against the Trump administration, but at this time they say they have not found any evidence that the fire was set intentionally. Meanwhile, in Washington, there is outrage brewing over the sentencing for the person who plotted to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. National correspondent Matt Galka reports from Washington.
A would-be assassin of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was sentenced to 8 years in prison, a penalty some Republicans are calling way too lenient.
This guy who tried to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh is nuts. That doesn't absolve him of a responsibility. I believe in free will and responsibility. But you have to isolate these people from society. And 8 years, he'll be out in 6. And he's a danger to society.
Nicholas Roski admitted to traveling to Justice Kavanaugh's home in 2022 from California as a decision from the court overturning Roe v. Wade was imminent. But Roski didn't go through with the attempt to kill him. Roski is transgender and was sentenced as Sophie Roski. The Justice Department was seeking 30 years.
It's barely a slap on the wrist for somebody who tried to alter the history of the United States by killing off an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court and then having the Biden administration try to replace him with a more progressive judge. It is outrageous.
Evidence included Roski's search history on the justices and how to commit murder. On the night of the assassination attempt, Roski walked past the U.S. Marshal at Kavanaugh's home while carrying a gun and burglary tools. Roski stopped the plan, calling 911 and turning herself in. U.S. District Court Judge Deborah Boardman called it an act of terrorism and incredibly serious, but deemed 30 years unreasonable, seemingly putting a lot of weight on Roski's cooperation with law enforcement. Boston University criminal law professor Angelo Petrick says the decision isn't that out of the ordinary.
It's not unusual for judges to depart sometimes pretty substantially below what the recommendation is when they find there's mitigation that affects their sort of calculation for what is an appropriate sentence.
The judge said she gave Roski's transition consideration because she'll be sent to an all-male prison, but it's unclear how big of a factor it played. Attorney General Pam Bondi called the sentencing woefully insufficient and vowed an appeal. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Coming up, the currency to commemorate the president that could come out for America's birthday. Stay with us. A $1 Donald Trump coin could be coming. The Treasury Department is considering minting one for America's 250th birthday next year. The Treasurer posted drafts of the design and confirmed they were real. You can see the two sides here. It is illegal for the Treasury to issue currency depicting a living president, but this may be allowed on a commemorative coin issued by the U.S. Mint. Well, that does it for this edition of the National News Desk. Join us again tonight for live updates from the streets of Portland. I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.